So welcome and accepting our invitation to a conversation on igniting the spirit, decorating ourselves through traditional crafts, which was a topic that Jamie had suggested when I spoke to her. So it's National Aboriginal Day and Summer Solstice Art Festival here on Victoria Island. We're in the Artist Pavilion. The theme, Decorating Ourselves, will explore how Indigenous peoples decorate everyday objects to communicate culture, values, and history. The four traditional crafts will be discussed by internationally known artisans Rick Hill Sr., Kate Brandt, and Jamie Coble. So we'll begin with Rick Hill Sr., who's a cradle board maker from Six Nations.
Well, good morning. I'm actually a Tuscarora. You know, we follow our mother's side of the family. So my dad's a Mohawk. He was an iron worker, and my mother was a homemaker and also a baby maker. But when I was born, we were pretty much told that cradle boards weren't good for children. Everybody should be born in a hospital, fed formula. So my parents kind of went along with that. When I got older, I began to look at how did we raise our kids, especially when I started having my own. And I discovered these cradle boards in museum collections. But in our community, I didn't see any. So I decided, well, I'm going to make some. So I studied how the old people made them, looked at the designs. I got tons of photographs over there. But basically, this is a Mohawk-style cradle board from Kahnawake, probably from about 1870 to maybe about 1920 is this style that they made them. But the cradle board is nothing more than a device by which you can carry a baby safely. So you bundle baby up, and as we all know, babies need to feel secure. You'd have this beaded wrapper on there. It's got this bow here in case it ever fell over, the baby wouldn't get hurt. You got a footrest. Well, these are also made when women were doing most of the labor cultivating corn. So when she's out in the cornfield, a younger sibling could actually then hold on to the baby. And the babies generally slept pretty good. Now, I tried to raise all my kids on a cradle board. I don't know if you can see the difference. Some of them get pretty wild as they get older, but it was supposed to make the kid calm. So the designs on the back, as you can see with this one, generally represent, a turtle represents the earth. We believe the world was made on the back of a turtle. The plant is the tree of life, flowering tree, produces fruit and vegetables. There's usually some birds feeding their young in the nest. Sometimes you'll see on the other ones, they'll have the clan animal of the mother and the father at the bottom. And we kind of believe up in the sky world, there's a tree of bright lights, kind of like a sunflowers emitting light. So this is my interpretation of the old style designs. It's important to connect to that. You know, in the Mohawk language, the word for the sky dome, the word for the roof of our longhouses, and the word for the shape of our head is all derived from the same. So this curvedness, we have this curvedness, our houses have the curvedness, the sky world has it. So I also believe that's what this represents here. The baby's born within this creation on the turtle. Sometimes they have elaborate designs, or in this case I just got one, but they would have these silver brooches that are very interesting because they come from a combination of the fur trade and Mohawk or Haudenosaunee designs, Iroquoian design. The boards themselves are highly influenced by Victorian design. So you see some funny things in them, like potted plants. Here we're people of nature, but for some reason they put potted plants in there because that was popular back then. So if you look at old beadwork, lace work, quill work of that era, it's all pretty similar. But the idea would be you're surrounding the baby with, first of all, wood, which we believe has the power, spirit to it. The designs have a very spiritual power to them. And you think of all the love you put into making this, because these take a long time to make. It's not just a physical device, but it's a way of immersing that child. So you can imagine you grow up looking at the world from the back of a cradle board. You get a little different view. And the fact is the kids are then upright and carrying them. And usually the mother would carry it on her back, the mother facing this way. The baby gets to see wherever the mother went, where she was from. But anyway, I think that's the idea behind this. Now, in the old days, it should have been a cornhusk style. Maybe we'll make a big one before we end. So we would make them for toys that the kids would play. The action would be growing up in them. and then the father or the mother's brother, the uncle, he would make the cradle board for her kids because all the kids belong to the mother's clan, the family. So it doesn't matter what the clan of the father is, that's where they belong. So it's a way of connecting the kid to family, to tradition, to these symbols of power. That's my rant.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Kate, who's Mohawk from Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory.
Okay, yes, I'm Mohawk, and I just want to let you know that there are many corn husk doll stories, and what I'm going to tell you is the one of my favorites. And in the old days, corn husks were 12 to 15 inches long, and so they're not now. So our dolls are getting shorter, GMO and all that stuff, right? So, anyways, the corn husk doll is a story much like the Bible tells fables and things with lessons to them. It's much like that kind of a story. So we say in the beginning, the corn husk doll was put in place to look after the children. And so the parents could be cultivating or hunting or whatever they had to do. And so the corn husk doll was very beautiful. And then, of course, there was no mirrors, so she saw her reflection in the lake. And so once she saw how beautiful she was, that distracted her. And she kept going to the lake and looking at herself and not following her responsibility of looking after the children. So the children began to complain to their parents. So the parents went to the elders, and the elders said, okay, we'll take care of that. And so then when the corn husk doll looked into the lake again, there was a screech owl came down and took the reflection away. And so that is why a corn husk doll never has a face. So the lesson is you always remember your responsibilities. You're not vain as to go and look at yourself all the time. And no one else is less or equal than you. No one's above you, no one's below you. Everyone is the same. Everyone has gifts. And so those are the fables that go with the corn husk doll. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So our next speaker is Jamie Coble. She's going to talk about Métis fish scale decoration. She's from the Métis settlements in northern Alberta, but lives here in Ottawa.
Good morning. I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the traditional art forms of the Métis, and well, of course, one of them is fish scale art. And I brought some examples here. So these are pink fish scales. They don't come off the fish this way. They have to be dyed. They're when they come off, they're white, sort of like the ones that are in here. They're undyed fish scales. And then after, we would take some time to dye them either with natural dyes like blueberries or petals from flowers where we would boil them. And the colors that would come out of those traditional dyes would color the fish scales, and this one is actually with blueberries. So when they're natural dyes, you can see that they're lighter in color, and that's a blueberry dye. And beets now, or whatever vegetables are available now, we'll use. But we also use synthetic dyes where you get some of the really bright colors like this. And when we're hard up, we use bingo dabbers too. Those work. We using the fish scale. A lot of people don't really know that up in northern Alberta, Lac La Biche, specifically Buffalo Lake, where I come from, we're fisher people. So we're hunters. We're harvesters of plants, berries, all kinds of food. But also fish are a huge part of our communities because we're around a lot of the lakes. And my dad is a fisherman, and my grandmother was a fisherman, and her husband was as well, and it was just generations of family members who were fisher people. So once they get the fish, they have to scrape off the scales, and we wash it quite a few times. Then we go through the dyeing process, which I talked a bit about earlier, which can take about up to 3 days, because they have to dry, then you have to dye them, and then dry, and then dye them. If it's synthetic, you have to take off the residue. way I do fish scale art is that I get my fish scales, which come from a white fish, from my community. So that makes it possible for me to stay connected. So I could go fishing and talk to and connect with fisher people here in the area, but part of my teachings are to keep connected with my community. So that ensures that I have to go home at least once a year to replenish my stock. And when they give me these fish scales, after we talk about what new babies were born, who got married, who graduated, and all those things, I feel almost like it's a permission to say, here you can have these scales, and I want you to go and teach wherever you're going to be, in Ottawa or wherever, about who we are, the Métis, Apitogosan, in northern Alberta. And when I do that, I talk about our relationship to animals and how we're not so different from each of these fish scales as human beings. When you take one of these fish scales and hold it up, you can actually see that there's a pattern on a fish scale that looks a lot like our fingerprint. It looks a lot like the rings in a tree, and so you can tell a lot by the health of the fish. You can tell a lot by the health of the lake through each of the fish scales. And artists have that traditional scientific, indigenous knowledge when we're working with them so that we can examine the scales once the fisher people do their job and pass it on to us. So that's a really holistic way of looking at how we do the art. We also get porcupine quills. There's different kinds of porcupines. These ones are from northern Alberta, so I like to tell people this is from an old man porcupine because they're much bigger porcupine quills. They're more insulated and they're from the north, so they're location specific, and that's how you can tell the difference with porcupine quills in different regions. We also have caribou up where I'm from, so we take the time to get caribou and sometimes leaving it white, the hair white, and sometimes dyeing it again with synthetic dyes. So all of these ways of working with fish scales, I put them together with caribou hair, put them together with porcupine quills and also porcupine hair, and that's all to kind of show our relationship and respect for the animals, and that anytime we get an animal, we use every single part of the animal to honor it, to respect it, so that nothing goes to waste. And that's a bit about Métis art. Here's an exaggerated version of a fish scale. I made it big because I like to show people that there's different ways of manipulating a fish scale when we're doing flowers. So whether you want a rose or whether you want a daffodil, maybe you want even a carnation, a modern day flower, you would, and the kids, every time I go into the classroom and teach it, I say you have to lick it, on one side. Don't like swish it around in your mouth or anything, but just lick it. And that makes it malleable to sort of bounce kind of closer and closer together until you can roll it and make a cone. And this will be maybe on the top of a daffodil. The bottom could be flatter, which is the bottom of the daffodil. And you can also make cylinders, which makes something closer to carnations or other flowers like this. So again, this is a teaching fish scale, which are the white ones. They have a black residue on the top, and so that kind of shows children direction of how to place the fish scales. The black part goes on the outside. So there's so much I can tell you about fish scale art, but I'll stop there and hand it back over to Simon.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm going to talk about birch bark biting. Here's an example of it. So birch bark biting is bark from a white birch tree, and you've all peeled the birch bark off the tree, and your parents said don't do that. And so it's probably one of the oldest forms of art and a way of teaching children about their culture. We have white birch throughout Canada, and wherever you see white birch, you'll see Native people, and particularly in this area, Algonquins, making these beautiful birch bark baskets. The rabbit on this basket, you can see it's repeated, and the reason it's repeated is somebody has cut out the stencil and repeated it, and then you scrape the basket to take the dark layer off to the white layer. So the birch bark biting can teach many different things. A friend of mine this week was saying that her grandmother used to write love letters to her grandfather on birch bark because there was no paper around. And she said, I don't know how she wrote it, probably with charcoal, And apparently she still has the letters. So, but the birch bark creates these beautiful designs. So you fold it, much like you would at Christmas, to make a snowflake, and where you're cutting it out. But in this case, you're biting the bark that's folded with your teeth, and it perforates the bark. So when you hold it up to the light, you can see these beautiful designs that are created by the bark. So the bark can be used as a pattern. And somebody was telling me the other day that they had this old beadwork, and they looked underneath the beadwork, and you could see the birch bark underneath it. And so a lot of times you create circles, you can create flowers. In this case, I had an insect in there. And it's to tell children, for one thing, that there's a relationship between insects and plants. You need the insect to fertilize flowers. The flowers represent medicine plants. A lot of the wildflowers that we see have medicinal qualities to it. Particularly in Ottawa, you see them everywhere, and Algonquins would have used them as medicine. And the circle can teach children about how things are connected, the seasons, our lives. So seasonally, it's spring. We just finished with spring, and we got summer. Well, a short spring, a summer, and then we complain about summer. Then we got fall, and then we complain about winter. And so you got the 4 seasons, but the 4 seasons also can teach us about our own life. So when we're young, we're in the spring of our life. And then as we become teenagers and get in all kinds of trouble, it's the summer of our life. And then the fall. And then when you get white hair like me, and you look at the medicine wheel and you see the white hair, that means the winter, and we're supposed to be wise. But so then the other thing, my daughter Mari is doing some research on birch bark biting. She's learning how to do birch bark biting. And she was talking about the sacred circle, that we just talked about. And that traditional medicines come from the flowers that are represented here. And then the medicine wheel, which can be taught, can teach young people the 4 directions. The medicine wheel teaches us that we've got 4 sacred directions, the south, west, north, and east, where the sun comes up. So in the early 1930s, Frank Speck, who was an ethnographer, came up to Gittigan Zibi, and he was asking a woman that was a birch bark biter, how do you do the designs? And she must have pulled his leg, because she said, I just chew on it, and these beautiful designs come out. And he wrote that, And so today we know that Frank Speck wrote down everything, even if it was a joke. So I just wanted to thank the speakers. We have time for questions for their presentations. I think they're very insightful. When I was young, I always wanted to know, that's a beautiful design, but what does it really mean? I think to the artists and the artisans that are here today have certainly spoken to the meaning and the values and the love that's part of the art that we all do. So we look at art from 4 perspectives: from the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual perspective. That's create these beautiful decorations and designs that reflect our identity and our culture. So, any questions? Normally what I do, and what Mari and I did, was we started with a circle. So the circle's really easy because you just sort of bite it straight across. The other mistakes you make when you first start, you don't bite hard enough, because but then some people bite too hard. So you got to find that balance. So you can do a circle, which is and then a flower, and then an insect It takes practice. And later you can practice because we have birch bark here for you to create your own design.
And pointed teeth helps.
Yeah, yeah, or teeth. It's your incisor. But people, if you had poor incisors, you can use other teeth.
I believe the first cradle boards were made out of that bark.
Yeah.
Because these are,
Yeah.
use the metal tools in order to make them. So they probably made it and then you could scratch the designs and just like that. Or if it was elm bark, which is pretty thick, it's got a reddish inside too. But it would be really great to do a cradle board, put corn husk style in there and decorate it with fish scales and porcupine quills. Yeah.
And then put a cornice doll in it.
Yes.
They used to attach little dolls hanging from here, so as the baby's growing up, something to play with. So you got the protective power of the wood, the design, and the little doll to look after the baby.
But Rick, you're absolutely right about there's a birch bark back holder for a baby.
Oh, yeah.
And they're about that big, and they would put them in the baby's bag because it's lighter.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
if you're on the land, you don't want to be dragging too many heavy things around.
Yeah.
So those birch bark baby
Cradle boards.
cradle boards are used today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And also some of the birch bark biting is also what some of the Métis from Northern Alberta do as well. And I have some examples at my table over there, but one of the kids asked me in a class I was teaching last week, they said, well, what if you mess up when you're doing the birch bark? And one of the things that we were taught was that when you're biting from the birch bark, you're actually also getting vitamins. So if you mess up, then you can boil it in water, you make a tea out of it, and you're still getting medicine, vitamin C and vitamin D out of it. And that's when we talk about the holistic practice of doing things, is that it's physical. It actually physically nourishes your body to do birch bark biting. Yeah.
I have to try that next time I mess up on a cradle board. You see me making
Boil it.
pine
Just boil
tea.
it.
Yeah, you boil it. I got it.
And if you mess up with corn husk, you can make a mat out of it.
Yeah,
That's right.
make a mat. But because this is a likeness of us as people, I always tell the children that they need to look at their hands and make sure that they have a good mind, the pure heart, and gentle hands before touching this, so that it takes on a good spirit when you're finished it.
And you won't mess up.
Yeah, you won't mess up.
This is a pine. Probably the older ones that were harder wood, yeah, because they were carved in the back, so it's hard to get a good piece of wood. Although I found some examples where they actually used two boards, put them together. Because, getting a piece of wood cut even like that a long time ago, it's quite a job. So they would use smaller boards, put them together, attach this in the back helps to solidify it. So, and there's several different styles of board. Seneca's Accused made smaller cradle boards. For some reason, Mohawks made these really long cradle boards.
Bigger kids.
I would think you could go up to a year. You see some of the pictures, and the babies are pretty big. And it used to. I wondered why the doctors tried to ban them back in the early 1900s. They said that it wasn't healthy for a baby to be pushing down on you. The baby's legs aren't strong enough. But of course now they're saying kind of just the opposite, getting exercise to kids. And of course you're laying flat on a piece of wood. So it used to be a joke. This is why a lot of native people have a flat rear end, because they grew up on a cradle board. They don't roll off the couch very easily.
And also,
I don't know if
if
that's
you,
true. But that's,
and also, we were taught too, if you put it against a tree and a big strong gust of wind comes by
Yeah.
and blows it over, then there's technology in it that will prevent the baby from getting harmed. So his head
Yeah.
doesn't hit the ground. It was a way of learning through observation instead of tactile. There's so many amazing teachings behind
Listening,
the
learning,
cradle board.
cognitive.
and of course, before they had the seatbelt laws, we used to just put our baby on there, put the baby on the back seat of the car, or when the seatbelts first came out, you could strap the baby in there. Well, you can't do that now, but so they were pretty handy a long time ago. Yeah. 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 Oh, that would be interesting, whether this would float. And archaeologically, they've shown that, say, if a baby did pass away, they would actually bury the baby on the cradle board, bury the whole thing, because chances are a cradle board was made for every individual, because it's something distinctive about it. And so I really detail the designs in here. So it's also, you grow up, you put your imprint on the cradle board. Does that make sense? You may keep it, have your kids use it, but it's tied together with rawhide, so it's fairly. I used to try to make them with no wooden screws, just all wooden parts, and push like this one here, put it all together. And now the older I'm getting, a couple of screws go in there, make it a little quicker. But it's the power of the wood that keeps the baby protected.
When you take a fish scale on its own, it's actually quite fragile. So if you were to press it down, you could snap it or you can break it. But once you start joining them together, we use glue. It's really strong, and I just like that. Like the Iroquois Confederacy, how they show the bundle of sticks, and that the more you have together, the stronger they are. So once it's in a flower form, you can actually press it down and throw it all around, and it won't break or crack. But just one scale on its own is quite fragile. So yeah.
And I should say the husk we use is from white corn, very long ears of corn. Like she mentioned, in the old days, the corn stalks used to be 15 feet tall, and ear corn up to 24 inches tall. So you could make a lot. You can also make bedding. You can make moccasin covers when it's muddy out. So that's very versatile. So I think generally our ancestors tried to maximize the use. If you got to cut down a tree, try to maximize the use of all the things, the bark, the root, the fibers, the leaves to make a tea. The same thing with the corn husk. But we also believe that corn is a living spirit, so therefore its leaves are living. Just like an eagle. The eagle is a living spirit, its feathers have power. It's like us, we're living, so our hair has power. So there's this thinking about then taking care of all of that stuff. So I kind of believe that's true. Same with the porcupine. I had to laugh. Saw one on the highway, and I was tempted to pull over. Of course, you're going on a 401. You don't want to stop too quickly, because you see all those quills just laying there that you could use.
Yeah.
I used to collect them and sell quill work, but unless you skin it right away, it's pretty smelly. I put it in a bag and I forgot about it for about 3 weeks. I was saying the same. What's that smell? And then I discovered this porcupine. Unfortunately, no matter how much you wash the quills, it just stunk too much. So I just returned it back to the forest and let the other animals have it. But you can actually remove quills from a porcupine without killing them too. So we used to just take a piece of leather and go up there, because they're pretty slow moving. Throw the leather over them, kind of nudge them. And actually what happens is their quills stand up on their back. They don't really shoot them. They stand up, there's a little barb on the brown end. You pull it off and you got a whole bunch of quills. You have enough to make something with.
We use blankets now.
Yeah.
So if we see a porcupine, we do the same thing. No, a living porcupine, a live one. You just put it on and then you just peel it off, and you don't have to kill it.
Yeah.
But we just for these ones, I got them up in northern Alberta, and they're so nice and thick. We would use these ones for jewelry. And then the thinner ones, I got some from Kitigan Zibi, and those ones are more for use of porcupine quill embroidery, and I have some examples of that as well. There's different kinds of quills for sure. Just like we have different kinds of hair, porcupines have different kind of hair color, as well as consistency and thickness.
Well, thanks for participating. I think it was a lively discussion, and thanks to the Ontario Arts Council for the funding to have this event today. So, miigwech. Thank you.